Hollywood once danced on the edge of chaos before the censors locked the gates. In the early 1930s, films were fearless, raw, and packed with storylines that left audiences whispering in disbelief. These weren't polite dramas. They were confrontations with life's darkest corners, told in ways no one expected. What happens when the screen dares to go too far? Stay with me, because some of these forgotten classics are wilder than you could possibly imagine. Safe in Hell, 1931. It begins with a woman running from trouble, but Safe in Hell doesn't play by the rules. Dorothy McHale stars as Gilda, a call girl forced to flee New Orleans after a man dies in a struggle with her. Seeking refuge, she hides on a Caribbean island where the only residents are fugitives, drifters, and lawless men. The setting becomes a trap, both exotic and claustrophobic, as Gilda realizes she's not free, but surrounded by danger at every turn. What makes the film so daring is how it tackles female survival in a world that sees women as disposable. Gilda doesn't wilt. She claws her way through every challenge, fending off threats while trying to hold on to a shred of dignity. For 1931, her defiance was radical. Instead of portraying her as a fallen woman to be punished, the movie presents her as a complex, determined survivor. The film's closing moments are unforgettable. With an eerie calm, Gilda embraces her fate with a level of self-possession rarely granted to women on screen at that time. It's not about glamour or redemption, it's about a woman owning her final moment. Safe in Hell is one of those titles that quietly vanished under the weight of the code, but it deserves recognition. It showed a heroine who wasn't simply saved by a man or condemned by her choices. She carved her own destiny in a world stacked against her. Island of Lost Souls, 1932. If you've ever thought early Hollywood shied away from the grotesque, Island of Lost Souls will prove you wrong. Based on H.G. Wells' The Island of Dr. Moreau, this film plunges straight into a world of twisted science. Charles Laughton plays Dr. Moreau, a man obsessed with turning animals into humans through surgery, creating a colony of eerie half-creatures who shuffle between man and beast. What makes the film unforgettable is its atmosphere. The island feels like a place rotting under a hot sun, full of shadows and creatures who shouldn't exist. When Moreau bellows, "Are we not men?" the chilling cries of his creations echo with both fear and submission. For audiences in 1932, this was nightmare fuel. The censors hated it. Countries banned it for decades, calling it blasphemous and unfit for public eyes. But beyond the shock factor, Island of Lost Souls raises deep questions about the cost of unchecked ambition. Moreau's obsession is about control, not science, and his downfall becomes a cautionary tale wrapped in terror. Visually, the film pushed boundaries with makeup and special effects that made the Beast Men hauntingly real. It's no exaggeration to say this movie paved the way for the horror classics that came later. Island of Lost Souls may not be a household name today, but once you see it, you'll never forget its twisted imagery. It's a chilling reminder that horror isn't about jump scares. It's about ideas that crawl under your skin and never leave. Babyface, 1933. Barbara Stanwyck wasn't just acting in Babyface. She was detonating a Hollywood bomb. The film tells the story of Lily Powers, a woman who escapes her abusive upbringing in a speakeasy and heads for New York. Once there, she climbs the social ladder by targeting powerful men and bending them to her advantage. What made Babyface so radical wasn't just its plot, but its message. Instead of scolding Lily for her choices, the film shows her using her intelligence, charm, and sheer willpower to survive in a world that gave her nothing. Each rung she climbs in the corporate skyscraper feels like a victory. even as her tactics scandalized audiences at the time. Originally, censors demanded cuts, but even the watered-down version caused uproar. The idea of a woman openly using her independence to dominate a male-driven world was too much for 1933 America. Critics slammed it as immoral, but audiences couldn't look away. The most striking element of Babyface is Stanwyck herself. She doesn't play Lily as a villain, but as a realist. Her eyes tell you everything. She knows the game is rigged, and she's simply playing it better than anyone else. This film has since been reclaimed as one of the boldest portraits of female empowerment in early Hollywood. Babyface isn't just a forgotten shocker. It's a reminder that even in the 1930s, someone dared to show a woman rewriting the rules. Red-Headed Woman, 1932. Jean Harlow didn't just act in Red-Headed Woman, she owned it with a grin that said she knew exactly what she was doing. Harlow plays Lil Andrews, a secretary who sets her sights on her married boss and refuses to let anyone stand in her way. She schemes, charms, and bulldozes her way into the wealthy world she believes she deserves. What makes the film unforgettable is Harlow's fearless performance. Lil isn't a tragic figure. She's having a blast. Every smirk and every one-liner feels like a jab at society's hypocritical moral codes. While audiences gasped, Harlow waltzed through the film with a wink that dared you not to love her. The movie sparked outrage. Reviewers called it indecent, studios fought over edits, and the production code officials fumed. But here's the thing. Audiences lined up anyway. The sheer audacity of a woman openly pursuing her desires and winning was irresistible. The final twist is brilliant. Instead of being punished, Lil thrives. She doesn't repent, she doesn't apologize, and she doesn't fade into obscurity. For 1932, that was a direct challenge to Hollywood's usual bad girl must pay formula. Red-Headed Woman remains a time capsule of Harlow's magnetism and the pre-code era's anything goes daring. If you want to understand why the censors clamped down so hard in 1934, just watch Jean Harlow laugh her way through this film. She was a firecracker they couldn't contain. Merrily We Go to Hell, 1932. With a title like Merrily We Go to Hell, you know you're in for something unusual. Starring Sylvia Sidney and Frederick March, this film dives headfirst into the world of alcoholism, broken promises, and unconventional relationships. March plays Jerry, a charming but troubled writer whose drinking spirals out of control, pulling his marriage into chaos. What shocked audiences wasn't just Jerry's dissent, but Joan's response. Played by Sidney, she refuses to play the dutiful, long-suffering wife. Instead, she declares independence, experimenting with her own freedoms in a way that startled 1932 moviegoers. Open marriages, shifting loyalties, and an unflinching look at addiction made the film daringly modern. Director Dorothy Arzner, one of the few prominent female filmmakers of the era, brought a sharp edge to the story. She didn't sugarcoat Jerry's flaws or paint Joan as simply a victim. Instead, she explored what happens when two people try to build love on unstable ground. The ending doesn't give easy answers, and that's part of its power. Merrily We Go to Hell doesn't pretend that everything can be wrapped in a neat bow. It reflects the messy truth of relationships. Sometimes they bend, sometimes they break, and sometimes they stumble into something new. The film is often overlooked, but it deserves more attention. It captures a moment when Hollywood dared to say that love could be complicated, that marriage wasn't sacred, and that women had choices, even if those choices weren't what society approved of. 3 on a Match, 1932. Some films pull no punches, and 3 on a Match is one of them. This Warner Brothers pre-code drama follows three childhood friends, played by Joan Blondell, Ann Dvorak, and Bette Davis, whose lives take drastically different paths. On the surface, it looks like a typical melodrama, but underneath, it's one of the darkest, most uncompromising portraits of decline Hollywood ever released. The story hits hard because it doesn't flinch. Anne Dvorak's character, Mary, spirals into recklessness after leaving her stable marriage for excitement. What follows is a whirlwind of poor decisions that drag her deeper into danger. She neglects her child, falls in with crooks, and ultimately makes a shocking sacrifice in a desperate attempt to save the little boy she endangered. For audiences in 1932, this was tough stuff. The film wasn't interested in glamour or happy resolutions. It wanted to show the brutal consequences of choices without cushioning the blow. Dvorak's performance is raw, and the final scenes are among the most haunting in pre-code cinema. The film also stands out for its frankness. Gambling, affairs, and moral collapse were all put on screen with startling directness. No wonder it rattled censors, who later banned it from reissue. Three on a Match might not be as famous as other Warner Brothers classics, but it delivers a gut punch that still resonates. It's proof that pre-code films weren't afraid to dig into the shadows of human behavior and show the costs of living on the edge. Night Nurse, 1931. When you hear the title Night Nurse, you might expect a simple hospital drama, but this movie is anything but routine. Barbara Stanwyck plays Laura Hart, a nurse who takes a job caring for two little girls, only to discover they're being starved by a sinister chauffeur, played by a young Clark Gable. What follows is part thriller, part social drama, and all edge. The film doesn't shy away from showing the corruption that seeps into the lives of vulnerable children. Stanwyck brings fiery energy to her role, refusing to be intimidated as she squares off against Gable's menacing presence. He barely speaks, but his silent, threatening stare is enough to make your skin crawl. What makes Night Nurse unforgettable is its sheer nerve. Child neglect and exploitation weren't standard Hollywood topics in 1931, yet the film shows them openly, refusing to hide behind metaphors. The tension builds as Laura risks everything to protect the children, even as danger closes in around her. The pre-code spirit shines brightest in Stanwyck's character. She's no damsel, she's a fighter. With the help of her wisecracking friend, played by Joan Blondell, she turns the tables in ways that both thrill and shock. Night Nurse has all the grit of a gangster picture mixed with the humanity of a drama. It's raw, it's bold, and it shows why Barbara Stanwyck became one of the defining stars of the era. Hell's Highway, 1932. Before Hollywood polished prison dramas into inspirational tales, there was Hell's Highway. This tough pre-code film throws viewers into the brutal world of chain gangs, where men are reduced to numbers and cruelty rules. The film's opening scene says it all. Convicts march in lockstep, their faces hollow, their voices chanting under the blazing sun. The story follows a group of prisoners who endure whippings, starvation, and backbreaking labor while dreaming of escape. The message is clear. This isn't justice, it's human exploitation. Hell's Highway struck a nerve because it mirrored real-life reports of chain gang conditions during the Depression. Audiences weren't just watching fiction, they were seeing echoes of headlines. That realism gave the film an urgency that made it impossible to ignore. Yet the movie also digs into themes of resilience and defiance. The prisoners, though beaten down, find ways to resist through humor, solidarity, and eventually revolt. The narrative doesn't glorify crime, but it does condemn a system that punishes men beyond reason. Censors bristled at the stark violence, but the raw honesty made it powerful. For 1932, this was revolutionary. Hollywood saying openly that the justice system could be as corrupt as the criminals it punished. Hell's Highway has faded from memory, overshadowed by later classics like I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang. But in its time, it was just as fierce, and it remains a fascinating glimpse into a cinema unafraid to expose ugly truths. The Story of Temple Drake, 1933. Few films of the early 1930s caused as much controversy as The Story of Temple Drake. Based loosely on William Faulkner's novel Sanctuary, this Southern drama shocked audiences with its stark portrayal of corruption and downfall. Miriam Hopkins stars as Temple, a young woman whose life takes a dark turn after she leaves her privileged home for an impulsive adventure. The film doesn't flinch from showing how quickly her world unravels. Temple becomes entangled with dangerous men and finds herself trapped in circumstances she can't control. For 1933 audiences, the mere suggestion of her suffering was shocking enough. The way the movie depicted her decline, without melodramatic sugarcoating, was unlike anything mainstream Hollywood had attempted. What makes the Story of Temple Drake remarkable is its daring honesty. Temple is no one-note character. She's complex, flawed, and painfully human. The story doesn't shy away from showing how society judged women more harshly, turning them into outcasts while excusing the men who dragged them down. Censors loathed it, calling it immoral and demanding it be pulled from circulation. And for decades, the movie was nearly impossible to see, locked away like a dangerous secret. But its influence lingered, showing that film could capture uncomfortable realities, even when people weren't ready to face them. The Story of Temple Drake is both a cautionary tale and a time capsule of a Hollywood that dared to be raw. Watching it today, you see not just a forgotten relic, but a brave, unsettling piece of cinema history. Call Her Savage, 1932. Clara Bow, the original It Girl, made her comeback with Call Her Savage, and she did it with fireworks. Playing NASA Springer, a fiery young woman with a reckless streak, Bow threw herself into a role that mixed melodrama, passion, and shocking defiance. From the start, NASA is shown as wild and untamed, challenging every social convention placed on her. She defies her father, breaks with polite society, and plunges into romances and adventures that were far bolder than audiences expected. What shocked viewers most wasn't just her behavior, but the unapologetic way the film presented it. The movie stuffed in every possible taboo subject: family secrets, betrayal, and moments of raw emotional intensity that still leap off the screen. Bow's performance is electric. After years away from film, she proved she hadn't lost a bit of her spark, delivering a character who felt larger than life and uncontainable. Critics, at the time, didn't know what to make of it. Some praised Bow's daring return, others called the movie outrageous. Either way, people talked about it, and that was exactly the point. Call Her Savage stands today as a snapshot of an actress refusing to fade quietly. Clara Bow embraced the chaos of her role and gave audiences something unforgettable. It's loud, it's messy, and it's exactly why pre-code Hollywood still fascinates us. Wild Boys of the Road, 1933. The Depression hit America hard, and no film captured its youth fallout quite like Wild Boys of the Road. Directed by William Wellman, this gritty drama follows teenagers who leave home when their families can no longer support them. They form a roving community of runaways, clinging to each other for survival while dodging danger at every turn. What made this film remarkable was its honesty. It didn't paint its young characters as delinquents. It showed them as victims of an economic system that had failed them. The kids hop trains, scavenge for food, and face threats from both authorities and predators. It's tough material even now, but for 1933, it was unthinkably raw. The film shocked audiences with its frank look at exploitation. These weren't glossy studio depictions of teenage life. These were kids sleeping in boxcars, forming makeshift families, and watching their innocence vanish. The realism stung. For audiences who lived through the Depression, it was a mirror they might not have wanted to see. But at its core, Wild Boys of the Road is about resilience. Even in their darkest moments, the characters show loyalty and courage. The ending, though softened by studio demands, still carries a sense of unease, reminding viewers that not all stories end neatly. It's a forgotten gem that proved cinema could be more than entertainment. It could be a reflection of reality. Watching it today, you can feel the urgency that once made it a lightning bolt on screen. Hot Saturday, 1932. Imagine small-town gossip exploding into a storm that ruins lives. That's the heart of Hot Saturday. Nancy Carroll stars as Ruth, a young woman whose reputation is shredded by one night of innocent fun. When word spreads that she spent the evening with a wealthy playboy, the whispers become louder than the truth, and Ruth finds herself ostracized by everyone she knows. The brilliance of Hot Saturday lies in its simplicity. It shows how gossip, once unleashed, becomes unstoppable. Ruth does nothing wrong, yet her entire future collapses because her community chooses scandal over compassion. The film hits hard because it's timeless. Who hasn't seen reputations destroyed by nothing more than rumors? Adding to the intrigue, this was one of Cary Grant's earliest roles. Playing the suave socialite, Grant oozes charisma, hinting at the legendary career to come. Randolph Scott adds another layer as the steady, reliable alternative. But it's Carol who steals the show with her portrayal of a woman trapped in a moral double standard. Audiences in 1932 were unsettled by the film's bluntness. It didn't sugarcoat the cruelty of judgment or offer Ruth an easy way out. The ending is bittersweet, leaving viewers to wonder how much of themselves they saw in the gossiping crowd. Hot Saturday is proof that pre-code films weren't always about big shocks. They were also about exposing quiet, everyday injustices. It's a forgotten reminder that sometimes the harshest villains aren't criminals, but neighbors. Scarface, 1932. Gangster movies didn't start with Scarface, but this one made sure they'd never be the same again. Directed by Howard Hawks, it tells the story of Tony Camonte, a ruthless Chicago mobster loosely inspired by real-life figures. From the moment Paul Mooney steps into the role, the film crackles with danger and energy. What set Scarface apart was its violence and audacity. Shootouts, double crosses, and explosions filled the screen at a time when such things were barely allowed. Audiences had never seen crime portrayed with such raw force, and the censors went into overdrive. Studio bosses were pressured to add moral lessons, but even then, the movie's impact couldn't be blunted. Scarface also shocked with its psychological depth. Tony isn't just a caricature, he's driven by ambition, obsession, and a twisted sense of pride. The movie hints at unhealthy attachments and portrays his downfall with a mix of fascination and dread. For 1932, this was heavy material. Despite attempts to water it down, Scarface became a milestone. It didn't just tell a gangster story, it redefined the genre. You can see its fingerprints on everything from film noir to modern crime dramas. It's wild to think that Scarface was once considered too dangerous for audiences. Today, it's hailed as a masterpiece, but in its time, it was a cinematic grenade that nearly blew the code apart. The Sin of Nora Moran, 1933. Some films fade because they're dated. The Sin of Nora Moran fades because it was ahead of its time. This surreal crime drama tells the story of Nora, a young woman convicted of a crime she didn't fully commit. Played by Zita Johann, Nora's journey unfolds in dreamlike sequences, blending flashbacks, hallucinations, and symbolic imagery. What makes the film unforgettable is its structure. Rather than telling a straight story, it dives into Nora's mind, showing fragments of memory, guilt, and fate. For 1933, this kind of non-linear psychological storytelling was groundbreaking. Viewers weren't used to movies that felt like fever dreams, and many didn't know what to make of it. The themes were equally daring. Nora is shown as a victim of circumstance, manipulated by men in power, and ultimately crushed by society's judgment. Instead of condemning her, the film invites sympathy, making audiences question whether justice had been served. Critics at the time were divided. Some found it confusing, others hailed it as bold. But in hindsight, The Sin of Nora Moran stands as a fascinating prelude to experimental cinema decades later. It may not have the polish of big studio productions, but it has something rarer: audacity. Few films from the early 30s dared to be this strange, this haunting, and this emotionally raw. Watching it now, you can't help but think it belongs more to the 1960s than the 1930s. The Cheat, 1931. Tallulah Bankhead was never one to play it safe, and The Cheat gave her the perfect stage. In this remake of a 1915 silent film, she plays Elsa, a woman trapped in financial trouble who makes a desperate bargain with a wealthy outsider. What follows is a tense game of power, desire, and consequences that rattled audiences of the time. The most shocking element was the storyline's intensity. The relationship between Elsa and her benefactor isn't romantic. It's transactional, full of manipulation and control. For audiences in 1931, the suggestion that a woman could be branded, figuratively and literally, was disturbing. But Bankhead makes it riveting. Her performance is fierce, capturing both Elsa's vulnerability and her fiery determination to fight back. She wasn't content to play a victim. She turned Elsa into a woman who clawed for her own freedom. What elevates The Cheat is its undercurrent of taboo themes that pushed beyond what was acceptable in polite cinema. While later versions of the story softened these edges, this pre-code remake leaned into them, creating a work that was both shocking and unforgettable. The Cheat may not be widely remembered now, but in its day, it was a conversation starter. And Tallulah Bankhead's unflinching performance ensures it still carries a bite more than 90 years later. These 15 forgotten pre-code shockers remind us that Hollywood once thrived on boldness before the censors slammed the door shut. They weren't just movies, they were challenges to the audience, daring people to confront uncomfortable truths and wild ideas. Which one of these films surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share this with fellow film buffs, and subscribe for more untold stories. The past is wilder than we remember. Are you ready to rediscover it?